So you're over 40, you're crushing it, you're about to hit your FIRE number, which could be $1 million, it could be whatever number in Bitcoin and maybe some other assets, but you're starting to scratch your head about what happens next. You've spent the last decade plus learning how to earn, how to save, how to invest, how to be wise with your money, but what catches most people off guard is this. What do I do when I actually cross the finish line? If you're following the 4% rule, then you're going to start selling 4% of your assets to fund your retirement years. But what if you don't want to sell off any of your assets? What if instead of forfeiting your hard-earned pile of Bitcoin and cash, there was a way to turn your asset pile into a nuclear reactor-style revenue generation engine? This entire scenario is what happened to my wife and me back in 2019 when we reached our FIRE number and realized we had no plan for what's next. So today I'm showing you the 3-phase exit plan that lets you turn your assets into income strategies well before you quit your job, including a training wheels phase most people skip entirely. So by the end of this video, you'll have a solid picture and a step-by-step plan to turn the asset pile you've worked so hard to build into that nuclear reactor of income for the next phase, next awesome phase of your life. By the way, for some context, if we're just meeting, my content is on a mission to empower millennials and Gen X to integrate Bitcoin more deeply into their personal finances so they can reach financial independence in 10 years or less. So this is what I like to call hitting that wall of fire. The goal in this section is I want to help you avoid the disarming assumption that hitting your net worth number equals financial freedom. Now, to be sure, in one sense, that's absolutely true. But imagine you're 40 plus years old, you've stacked significant Bitcoin and some other assets over the last decade and a half, and you're ready to quit tomorrow, right? But what you're nervous about is even though you've got a nice asset pile, you don't really want to follow the 4% rule and start selling stuff off just to live off of. It's hard to make that kind of transition from income to selling stuff huge. Your delicious Mount Everest of assets are in a kind of frozen appreciation mode with really no way to turn that into income yet, right? So this is what you're nervous about. Giving up your current income, even though if you were like me, crappy corporate job, couldn't wait to get out, but still the income was nice. Realizing that your net worth, your asset pile is not really income yet. The idea of being asset rich and cash poor simultaneously is, kind of a night sweat kind of idea. And this is the fire trap that I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. So I think it's really important to talk about it because it's a mistake that my wife and me made. Looking at the finish line in this next framework will help you to completely visualize how much to make the fire pivot with much more confidence. How to make this looking at the finish line in this next framework will help you completely visualize how to make the fire pivot with much, much more confidence. So there are 2 phases of investing. If you follow my channel, you know I talk about this all the time. More than likely, if you're pre-fire, you're in the capital growth phase, and this is where everything is focused on net worth. You're focused on, Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate. And then when you hit fire, this is when you transition into the income generation phase, unless, of course, you're following the 4% rule. But if you're here, you're probably not wanting to do that. And so this is where you bifurcate, or in some way you parse out your income stack or your asset stack to start generating income. So when you're in the income, or when you're in the capital growth phase, this is what your asset allocation probably looks like. 95% is in growth, maybe 5% is in preservation, gold, silver, bonds. Then when you cross that threshold, million, 5 million, 10 million, 500,000, whatever it is, then you can parse out, part of your income or part of your asset pile into income generating assets like dividend yielding, ETFs or stocks, Bitcoin backed loans. Those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. So the next question is, if you can't wait until you hit your number to figure out your income generation, then when do you start? So I'm going to show you the training wheels phase, which is basically like a low risk way. And this is exactly what we're doing right now to test your income strategies while you're still employed, while you're still in the capital growth phase. So I covered these kind of strategies more in depth in my micro newsletter. If you want access to that, just type micro in the comments. The training wheels phase, and I'm going to talk about this specifically in the context of STRC and BTCI, which is something that my wife and I and many people in our community are actively experimenting with. So the goal is to kind of give you a safe sort of sandbox to learn income mechanics before you've crossed that threshold and now all of a sudden you got to have all this income, right? Because then the pressure's on. As an experiment, let's say we take 50K from your portfolio, which if you have $1 million portfolio, that's basically 5%. And this is money you can afford to experiment with and allocate it into income generating strategies like covered call ETFs or Bitcoin yield products, right? And I know what you're thinking. There's a part of you that's like worried about giving away upside growth while you're still in the growth phase. And what if Bitcoin doubles and you're stuck collecting pennies? And so I get that. I want to address that. So here's the math. So this is something that we're doing, and I'll mention here in a second. Like I've got a BTCI playlist, which is in the description below if you want to follow along with how we're doing this. We started it back in October. But we took a $50,000 position in BTCI, which yields more or less about $1,000 a month. So it teaches you sort of the plumbing of the passive income space without risking any of your core stack, okay? So you learn about payout timing, the tax implications of whatever asset you're in, and then the reinvestment mechanics. And like I said, I've got a whole BTCI playlist. Link is in the description below if you want to follow along in that. But what about borrowing against my Bitcoin stack? And what happens when I need liquidity during a bear market when my income strategies are underwater? That's why you need to understand the buy, borrow, die strategy, which we talk about a lot on this channel as well, and the 3 guardrails that protect you when volatility hits. And by the way, if you're getting value out of this, you're basically obligated to smash the like button at this point. So mastering the buy, borrow, die strategy with guardrails, and that's a really important piece, with guardrails. So the goal is to kind of show you how to access liquidity without selling your Bitcoin stack and without putting your Bitcoin stack at risk. As a millennial, no pensions, probably no Social Security. You are basically your own bank. And so the buy, borrow, die framework lets you keep your assets while accessing cash liquidity. And I get it. Borrowing against your Bitcoin feels risky because a lot of the ways that people talk about it doesn't seem like there is a safety zone. And so you're always like, okay, well, what happens if it drops 50% or 80% and you get liquidated? So I want to help you, I want to outline a framework that's going to help you make sure that that's 100% never going to happen to you. And I believe me, that's totally possible. So here are the 3 safety rules. When it comes to borrowing against your Bitcoin, never borrow against more than 10% of your total Bitcoin stack. Now, if that means that you don't have a lot of Bitcoin right now, because we talk about 0.1 and 0.21 a lot on the channel, that means you probably don't have enough Bitcoin to borrow against yet. So that could be 5 to 10 years out when Bitcoin is at a much higher valuation. Also, keep the loan to value. I'm not going to go into these concepts right in depth here, but the loan to value under 30% so that you can sleep through any of this volatility, right? And then another really important thing is understanding the 4 levels of liquidity for managing debt during bear markets. Now, I'll link in the description below videos that I go through each of these core concepts on. So you can click those and, if you want to do a deeper dive into those ideas. But knowing the rules isn't enough. You need to practice them before you actually need them. That's why we're talking about these things. If you're still in the capital growth phase, it's a good idea to just kind of dip your toe in the water. So let me show you the transition from the growth mindset to the income mindset and why this is the most unnecessary mistake that you can make. You don't have to do what my wife and I did and all of a sudden be thrust into this moment where we're like, oh crap, what are we going to do? So speaking of getting some liquidity, I wanted to take a quick moment and introduce you guys to our channel sponsors. Horizon helps you take your fiat trapped home equity, buy more Bitcoin with it. You get to custody the Bitcoin however you want. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to check out the calculator. I'll also talk more about Horizon at the end of the video. Real quick, you guys know I talk about the importance of self-custody all the time. And I know a lot of you guys are totally overwhelmed by it. That's why I love our channel sponsor, Bitbox Hardware Wallets. If you want one of the most secure cold storage Bitcoin wallets that's also super user-friendly, the Bitbox O2 Nova is for you. When I'm recommending hardware wallets to my audience, they must have 2 criteria. Bitcoin only as an option, and then also they must have fully open source and auditable source code. The Bitbox meets both of these criteria and is the ultimate self-sovereignty tool. You can think of it as a Swiss vault for your Bitcoin private keys. It's USB-C and literally works with everything: Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and Android. It has an easy-to-read tempered glass display and Swiss bank vault levels of security. This is is one of my favorite Bitcoin wallets in my 13 plus years in the Bitcoin industry. And guess what? If you click on the link in the description, you can use the code BRAD for 5% off. That's right, 5% off if you use the code BRAD. This is the perfect gift if you want to encourage your friends and family into holding their Bitcoin private keys in sovereign self-custody. The link is in the description below. Buy a BitBox O2 Nova today unless you want to lose all your Bitcoin to the banksters. Let's talk about the transition from growth to income, because this is, something in our society that there isn't really a clear finish line, and boy, there certainly isn't going to be anyone cheering you across the finish line. I can promise you that. So the goal is to shift your thinking from accumulation to sustainable cash flow. So this is like an entirely new skill set that you're going to want to kind of start practicing now. For years, you've asked, how can we increase our savings rate? How much can I accumulate? Now you need to ask, how much cash flow can I sustainably pull from my asset pile without putting myself at too much risk? Most people make this switch after they retire, raising my hand. By then, you've forgotten how to take calculated risks and you're too scared to experiment, especially if you've got the pressure of, getting some kind of income off of your asset pile when you don't have the skill set to do that. So they're absorbing a brand new learning curve that they could have taken in small bites during the later stages of their accumulation. So that's what we're doing right now. So the transition should start now. You can do a couple of these things. Take out a small experimental amount this month and move it into an income generating asset like we talked about with BTCI. It doesn't have to be 50K. Maybe it's 5K. Maybe it's an even smaller amount of that. But getting some skin in the game is going to help you start to see how things work. And then on the buy, borrow, die strategy using Bitcoin-backed loans, you can try a small, low loan-to-value Bitcoin-backed loan to understand the plumbing of your future life, to understand how to take out a loan, how to monitor the loan-to-value, making sure you have your 4 levels of liquidity. So here's the thing that might be a little clearer to you now. Hitting your FIRE number isn't really the finish line. It's really the start of a new job. And I'm going to show you what that job actually looks like and why you need to start training for it today. And by the way, if you're scratching your head about how all of this works and you're not sure where you are on your journey, maybe even on your FIRE journey, you're not sure what to do next, or you just want a second set of eyeballs on your situation, I offer 30-minute calls, links in the description below. My calls are very reasonable. And then right now I'm doing a weekly live stream on YouTube where you can show up and ask questions if you've got specific questions about this stuff. So hitting your FIRE number is the start of a new job, managing your personal endowment. You're no longer an accumulator, you're now a steward and a business owner. So you're going to need a structured framework to start understanding this strategy. That's exactly what I cover in my 3 stages of financial independence video. Click the link in the card above or in the description below, and I'll see you there. Now, we all want to own more Bitcoin, but most of us aren't sitting on piles of idle cash. That's where Horizon comes in. Horizon lets homeowners convert a portion of their home equity into Bitcoin so they can diversify into an asset with stronger long-term growth potential. What makes Horizon stand out is its flexibility. There are no monthly payments, no interest charges, and no fixed term limit. You stay in your home, you stay in control. And the Bitcoin you buy is fully yours to hold in custody however you choose. This means no margin calls, no forced selling, and no scenario where Bitcoin volatility puts your home at risk. If you believe that Bitcoin will outperform your home's growth over the long term, Horizon gives you a way to act on it using capital you already have. Horizon has already helped hundreds of homeowners put their equity to work in Bitcoin, and they'd love to help you as well. Visit joinhorizon.com using this QR code or the link in the video description. You can see how it works and estimate how much Bitcoin you can unlock in just 90 seconds. Transform your home equity into Bitcoin today with Horizon.